When looking at my best list for 2024, I'm reminded why I feel so divided over this year. Because yes, the worst is absolutely awful and the top two made the bar sink even lower than before, but there was a lot of good material to come out of this year. I'd even go one step further and say some of these singles are actually able to compete with some of the older songs from Monstercat. The best of this year seems to combine several different years of Monstercat. The future-based pop era of 2018, the creativity of 2022, and we even got some callbacks to earlier years of Monstercat. That's reflected across all three sublabels. For Uncaged, while there were a lot of low points, there were also a lot of surprises as well, and most of this list contained a lot of that sublabel. I'd argue Instant got better in 2024, where Monstercat seemed to take notes and add some variety, and while the overall quality of the sublabel this year was passable for the most part, Instinct was able to secure some pretty good singles on this list. And for Silk, not only did Natural Good make a massive return, we also got some great singles from the sublabel as usual from BT, Oracle, Shingo Nakamura, and Arshand. And while it's easy to overlook this because of the other side, when I look at the full picture, I've got enough to satisfy me. So much so that I'm doing something I've never done with these lists before. If you want to see what missed the cut for this list, but are great songs that you should listen to, here you go. Check these out, let me know what you think. But without further ado, let's get on with the list. But first, some updated rules. Number 1, 2 artists per song in the top 10, and 1 artist per song in the honorable or dishonorable mentions. And number 2, no remixes or VIPs, although VIPs can be a factor and sequel songs can count. So with that said, let's get to our list of honorable mentions in no specific order, starting with I was convinced that this song would top my list at the beginning of the year, and while it has grown off me a little bit, plus some newer songs took the top spot, 40 is still a great track, primarily because of Backy Peter's rich and dynamic synth design. The vocal chop accompanying the intro, the synthwave of the midsection of the song that reminds me a bit of Haywire, and the crispy percussion, along with a great piano melody to accompany the production. These additions actually complement the song and make it stand out from Backy Peter's work while still providing us with Backy Peter's iconic style. Great song. I know we'll be fine, yeah. You stay here in my mind, yeah. Talk me out of this crisis. 2024 was the year I became a fan of Solomon France. I had no clue who this guy was until I heard he was going to be on Monstercat. He's an Australian drum and bass producer who's made a specific genre called surf drum and bass around 2022. Since then, he's gained a well-respected reputation for making some great drum and bass songs. One of them for me is Jumpin', which is one of my favorite songs of the year, labels regardless. And Crisis, while it's not my favorite tune, it's still a great song, taking notes from Fox Stephenson, creating a solid bass line and percussion, accompanied by some warm electric guitar strums and an amazing guitar solo. And Solomon Francis himself provides some great vocals, especially once the beat switches into halftime with those vocal whoops. If anything, this feels closer to rock territory, and given how good the guitars are, that is a compliment. Can we keep this guy around, please? 'Cause I still love you, and I'm going under. I know people will most likely pick No Tomorrow for their lists, and I don't blame them, it is a great song, but I've decided to go with this, as this just hits harder for me. Jonah Kagan's vocals performance has enough emotional energy behind it to sell the heartbreak of the song, and the production from Jason Ross and Fairlane complements it, with the acoustic guitars providing some drive on the build-up, and some misty atmosphere with the ominous synths providing a good starting point to the song. And the drop effectively delivers with a pop-punk approach that makes some of Fairlane's best music. With that vocal chop having a lot of power and weight behind it, kinda reminds me of Millennium's Ascend in a way. For Jason Ross, this is the best single off of his EP, although for Fairlane, we're gonna see him a little bit later on this list. I'm actually shocked this did not make the list proper, given how highly anticipated this single is, not just from me, but from other people as well. I could put more No Mana songs on this list, although Hopeless was very close to replacing this. And while there's actually another No Mana single much later on this list that took me by complete surprise, this is a fantastic tune in its own regard. A lot of it has to do with that large chiptune lead on the drops, along with some synth accents that actually add to the melodies, making them more dynamic. I actually like how it takes a while to get from the first drop to the second drop, making you bask in this mysterious atmosphere, great vocals that feel like a throwback to 2015, and continuing synth accents. This would have been higher on the list if it weren't for the lack of room, and No Mana making the list proper much later. I'm starting to realize that Sultan King is at his best when he experiments with other genres and moves away from the screechy rhythm, or when he makes an effort on his melodic heavy hits like Fall Apart last year, or Lean On Me this year. The beginning definitely falls into the former category, as Shoutout is a genre that Sultan King hasn't covered a lot, and has the same effect that Thrones of Blood did last year, being this huge anthem with a great hook and solid drum and bass percussion. Those guitar accents sound great as usual with the epic adventurous feeling, and the drops are lots of fun, starting with that huge sharp lead, and then switching to something more aggressive with that sustain sounding pretty nice overall, along with the GTA and TikTok sample on the drops that work surprisingly well. I have no clue what Sultan King's album is going to be like, or whether it's going to be another Thrones of Blood album situation. I just hope we get more songs like this on the album. I never thought I missed bro stuff on Monstercat, but after way too many awful Britdom songs this year, yeah, I kinda missed this bro stuff that dominated 2017 and 2020. And for it to come to Pixel Terror is both surprising and obvious at the same time, because on the one hand, this sort of sound is familiar with a former duo's older work. On the other hand, Pixel Terror has evolved so much into this hyperpunk sound that getting a song like this feels unexpected. And there are elements of this sound in this song, with the electric guitars on the intro and second drop, along with Michael Swank fitting into the pop-punk territory with his vocals. But those drops are what make the song work for me. These massive chiptune growls complementing the great lead melodies creates this grander feeling to the song that hasn't happened for Pixel Terror since Sleepless. Although since they both have some well-respected names on each, this one being the Living Proof, that's not too shocking. Still, I hope we see more of this from Bentley, and I hope this is the last time we see the Living Proof. Great song. This song took some time to grow on me, especially since Emergence felt like Blank creating a series of songs that sound great in quality, but none of the good writing and melodies that made his 2023 single so good. But after a while, I began to appreciate this as more Rivals tune than Blank's. The heavy drop definitely comes from him. Between the low synth growls, the laser effects, and the orchestral elements, his bass-heavier, bombastic style is more present here in the first drop, with Blank contributing to the melodic drop, which does sound pretty with those vocal chops and crispy percussion clap. And I realized that Blank did a really great job with the overall mixing too, as the bass has enough low end to cut through and create this full sound. So while it's not Blank's best work on the label, it's a song that doesn't really need to be. As a result, we have a pretty great track that blends both Blank and Rival styles nicely. I'm actually intrigued to see how he adds to the boss fight collab that got teased this year. I could see this making other people's list proper, but for me, there is one song from the EP that edged this out. But since I mentioned boss fight, ...2024 was a cooldown year for boss fight, and honestly, I don't blame him given the insane year he had in 2023. But with the two singles he had this year, he made the most of both of them. And while Decimate has become the fan favorite, I prefer the second single, Ballistic. Between the acid synths, the typo of the song, and the inspiration from Space Laces, it's a track that feels like a huge adrenaline rush, to the point where it feels like he took grit and injected it with steroids. And the ISO-EXO-esque trap drop sounds great too, featuring a really satisfying bass skitter. Who knows what Boss Fight has in store for 2025, but if he keeps making songs like this, I'm satisfied. Now on to the list proper, starting with number 10. The similar thing going for this song and Heaven by Blank is that this song isn't able to compete with some of their top songs. And on some level, that's not a fair comparison. Not everything that they're going to create is going to top their best work. And when the song is as good as it is, that's what really should matter. And while Heaven is a good example, this is one of the better examples of that logic. If anything, I'm glad Haywire is back making music again. He was one of the big reasons why Instinct was tolerable at all last year, and while this isn't as good as Wet Lie or Do You Don't You, I feel like Haywire has an already pre-existing fan base that can just make whatever he wants and the fans will love it. So much so that on the Best of 2024, this was voted as the second best Instinct song this year. And it's easy to see why. The song starts out with an ascending synth lead that sounds pleasant, which complements faint saw pads, and the low-pitched vocal chop fits well, mostly because it's kept to a minimum and Haywire made the vocal sample easy to listen to. Then the drops come in, and while they're fairly straightforward, the sound design elevates them. The sharper saw pads and the goopy bass growl add some color to the production and makes it sound rich. Haywire's iconic leads just add to production so much more. The fact this got added to Rocket League makes too much sense given the Mario Kart feeling, especially with that piano bridge. If anything, this reminds me of High Enough by Grant, where the song is clearly not any of their best work, but the song is so vibrant and expressive that it doesn't need to be. And while we're on the topic of Grant, number 9. I was not a fan of Blank's EP Emergence when it first came out, and while it has warmed up on me, mostly because of Heaven and Crashing Hard growing on me, a lot of the EP went into a direction I didn't like, where all of the decent writing and emotionally hitting songs were replaced with songs that might sound nice, but they didn't really add to anything. And it's not like they were topping Blank's previous discography, but more so that all the metallic synth design of this heavy stuff was just gone. A lot of it sounded tame and underwhelming. Turmoil with AU5 and Alpine were the worst cases, and they both barely avoided my worst list, as the song was well produced, but both Blank and AU5 have done so much better musically, and it felt like they were on autopilot the whole time. And that's the feeling I got from the rest of the newer singles. That said, this is an exception. I find it funny that in order to make the best song on the EP, he had to team up with Grant in order to do it, and let's make no mistake, Grant did help a lot with this, especially in the drops where his vocal chops are the dominant presence. If anything, this is just All I Need Part 2, replacing Jason Ross with Blank and speeding up the tempo into a faster future bass tune. But I do hear Blank sound in here, particularly on the verses. Those sparse twinkling synths, the bass guitar, the vocal cues from Your Friend Polly, plus the blocky claps. You can absolutely tell Blank took notes from Millennium years ago when they worked together, because a lot of his verse production sounds similar to Ascend with how large it feels. You can even hear his work on the drops with those saw pads and percussion, plus the fake out, where Blank's vocal chop comes in for a brief second. And given Blank and Grant's wildly different styles, the fact that it comes together is an achievement all on its own. But it's the emotional core that makes the song work for me, and it's why I highlighted the Millennium influence. A lot of this is because of Your Friend Polly's vocal performance, which is very soothing to hear, especially when the production is this good. And it also matches with the content of trying to help someone out when they're feeling broken, or when they need a helping hand. And while this isn't as good as Used to Losing You or Talk to You in terms of Blank songs, Heavy Heart is the sort of song I want Blank to make more of. Great song. Number 8. And speaking of exceptions to underwhelming EPs, like with Emergence, I didn't like Genesis when it first released. A lot of his pop-punk sound just became commercialized with the EP, and any attempts to do something different either didn't get the proper utilization, like on Only the Good Die Young, or failed horribly. See my worst list if you want to know what that song is. And after a month away from that song's release, Not My Name came around and it just felt like mood whiplash. Fairyland is at his best when he speeds up the tempo for more of a pop rock approach. This worked well on Wake Up and Out Loud, and it works well here. There are definitely parallels in production between this and Heavy Heart on the drops. They both have vocal chops as the main sound and have a hard-hitting snare to accompany it. And while this is more on the generic side of that style when compared to Heavy Heart, The way it sounds is enjoyable enough to listen to. I really dig these drops. Now let's talk about the key switch, because it's understanding why it's there that got me to like this a lot more. When I first heard it, I didn't like it because for a song all about being miserable and not getting things together, the key switch from minor to major just felt off. And it felt like it only existed in order to fit the pop punk aesthetic. Until you actually pay attention to the content, you realize that's the point. The song is about John London of Point North not having it together to the point where he's drunk enough to cry. So much so that his partner has just had enough with him, and the final line of the chorus is that he's content enough that he's already fine if they're walking away. And it's the final drop with that major key that signifies acceptance. That he's had a bad night, and afterwards he's going to try his best and move on. Combine this with John London's excellent vocal performance, and you have one of the few emo songs on Monstercat that I actually like. It's the writing and content that edged this over Blank and Grand for me, and like that song, it's something I want to hear more of from Fairlane. Number 7. Let's go back to the topic of competing with someone's top work. Like I said before with Heaven and Chromatically, the songs should stand on their own. It's not good to have this expectation that every single new song is going to top their best work, because it puts pressure on the artist to constantly one-up themselves and limits creative freedom. But when the artist can't compete with their best work, oh man. I might have to go back to Fool's catalog, but for now, this might be my favorite Fool song to date. I've had a back and forth relationship with this guy's music. I liked his early era of electro house with Shoutout and Need You, but it was his combination of mid-tempo and synthwave that I always viewed as his worst. But in 2023, he actually started to get better with his album Machine, where he combined all of his styles into one cohesive album, and is an album that I frequently return to. He started adding in some grit to his mid-tempo, and his synthwave started to get more expressive. My favorite song on the album was Vibrance with Allison, a chill wave cut that sounded absolutely gorgeous, and for a while, that was my favorite Fool track. Then I heard Damage, a song that seemed to take his synthwave style to a whole nother level if that was even possible. I love the stormy atmosphere of the song and how it starts out like you're going on an adventure. I also like how you can hear song styles from other Fool hits, such as those flutes and sword clashes from Duality, the Diet Motor mid-tempo drop at the halfway point, the vocal choir in The Law, plus some welcome additions like a saxophone on the second half of the song and a guitar riff towards the end. But what really does it for me are those sharper synthwave leads on the drops. It's something I've never heard Fool done before outside of maybe Inertia, and wow, it sounds amazing with the rest of this production. It's got this drive and impact that I've always wanted Fool to use, and I'm guessing with the reception that this single has gotten, I'm expecting we're going to hear more of those synths, because when you know it, those synths came back with his collab with Vaj and Askeda, and it was easily the best part of that track. I'm happy this got put on Beat Saber. I had such a blast playing it with this song. Never thought I'd be looking forward to Fool's music as much as I am, but here we are. Number 6. There seems to be a recent trend going on where I'm noticing a lot of bright, colorful, and catchy songs. It all seemed to start with the debut of Chime back in 2020 with Voidwalkers, a song that I still enjoy to this day. But I got the feeling the interest peaked in 2021 with the song Sleepless. If you're a Monstercat regular, you know how beloved that song is. Most of it came from Chime and Temanite, who blew everyone away with their brighter styles of dubstep. Fast forward to 2024, and we have a lot more of these colorful songs. And given the amount of awful Burdom songs this year, it's at least nice to see these songs pop up every once in a while. For example, if I had a nickel for Monstercat songs in 2024 that sounded like Mario Kart, I would have 3 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it not only happened 3 times, they're all from 3 different artists. This track was actually previewed first in 2023 with an interview with the I'm Peaking podcast, along with Heavy Heart. I was looking forward to this single for a while, and in 2024, it finally released, with Grant doing a drum and bass song with his signature style. And his style is all over this song, with those vocoder vocal samples making the bulk of the song once again. They're an absolute earworm to listen to and fit the brighter, peppier style of the song, which is where the vocal chops come in and just sound great. You could tell all Grant wanted to do was just make a fun song. Although the problem does come in with the second drop, as the grimy bass line doesn't exactly fit with the rest of the track. It's why it's not higher on this list. But still, it's a great track from Grant, an experiment done well. What else can I say? Grant made yet another hit. Number 5. So what happens when you take a Speedhouse producer and a color-based producer and you put them in a room together? Well, you get this. The fact this became Song of the Year is no surprise to me. I'm surprised it's taken me this long to cover Chill properly, since her Speedhouse style is so iconic and well recognized by the community, as her songs Fool Me and Ignite with Milk have become fan favorites, and unfortunately got snubbed from the best list last year. And while I did enjoy those songs, my lingering worry was that her songs were going to start sounding the same and lead to what I call a burnout phase, when the artist keeps making the same song over and over again and you get tired of hearing it. But thanks to a collaboration with Skybreak, not only did she top the best list, it also addressed my biggest worry with her music. It's a combination of Speedhouse and color-based that combines the best of both to create a fun and catchy track. The Speedhouse drops sound really good as the drive and flow create a bouncy nature to the song, and while the second drop is standard Skybreak color bass, and in my opinion the weakest drop of the song, it actually fits well with the rest of the song nicely. But the best drop, and the one that puts it on the list proper, it's the techno drop. Not only was it a big surprise, the bass design creates a solid atmosphere, and this before the mid-low synth stabs come in to create more groove to the drop. It's a great collab, an excellent way to experiment with genres, and I'm happy that most of the community tends to agree. Check it out if you haven't already. Number 4. As I've said before, 2024 was an incredibly busy month. Not only because of huge names making their debuts, but also the return of so many artists from the label. And while a lot of them can be a mixed bag, there are plenty of good songs in here. Letting Go by Bensley and Voicians, Power by Nitrofun, Pandora by More Plastic, and even acts like Yetep stepped up their game and made a decent song with Real Love. With the amount of returns, there's two particular that caught me by complete surprise. This is the first of those two, since I never thought that this artist would ever return to a label again. And again, just like with Chromatically in Heaven, this is nowhere near the best, but I'm just happy World came back. Yeah, this is probably the recent bias talking as to why this is so high on my list, but this is a really great song on its own right here. World was one of the first artists that got me into Monstercat along with Desero. Little Too Close was one of my favorite Monstercat tracks, period, and Hang Up was one of my favorite pop songs from 2018. Seeing him back after Wishful Thinking 3 years ago sounded impossible, but it happened. And he also brought along Solomon France, one of the most promising drum and bass acts I've heard in a long time, for a simple yet effective dance floor drum and bass song. People are pointing out that this song sounds more like Solomon France's song than World's, and while I definitely see where they're coming from, I do hear World's sound here. The ominous synths playing against the opening guitar lick, although Solomon France's presence is huge on this song, as his signature surf drum and bass sound with the electric guitars and bassy snare far closer to his territory. And just like with Crisis, the sounds and rich production make it closer to pop rock territory in the best way possible. Along with Chris Quinson's vocal performance, which isn't super special, but it does fit with the pop rock territory, and the hook does sound nice. But the best part for most people, and this includes me, are World's synth leads on the drops themselves. Not only do they sound great and the melody is fantastic, he managed to fit it well with Solomon France's sound to the point where they could be heard as electric guitars. We'll see if this track is still this high in the years to come, but for now, this is a great track, a great comeback, and it deserves this spot for me. Number 3. As of writing the script, I have no clue what people think of this song being here. While I do get the feeling that a lot of people like this song, most people wouldn't have put it so high on their lists. But for me, this is the second song where not only the returns caught me by surprise, but the song itself did. And I did not expect it from these two artists. Again, like with Coming Back, who knows if this will change looking back at this list, but for now, that is the case. And if that means putting this song here, screw it. Even with the abundance of returns, I did not expect this collaboration to happen. But in the year of surprises known as 2024, this song came at the best possible time, when I was convinced Cascade was done with the label after Reset, and Punctual were on a downward spiral after repeating. And after Perfect flopped badly, not to mention the song's not very good, Heaven Knows was a song I was hoping Punctual would make again, because progressive house is where it plays into their best strengths as producers. The opening analog synths playing off a solid bass line was enough to really pull you into the song, along with Poppy Bascom's vocals complementing the production. Her vocals have this adventurous feeling to them in the same way as Scape did with Hayla. I also really like how the lead melody on the drops will sputter out and go in a different direction. That way the song doesn't become too tedious. And since we're on the subject of drops, they showcase Punctual at their best, creating a solid progressive house track where the production sounds rich and dynamic, along with Cascade providing some solid atmosphere with the ambient pianos on the verses and the ghostly synth accents on the drops. It's a song that might be the best from both acts on the label, and since Cascade has miles to go, that is saying something. And while the marketing is very obvious, given that both acts are the only ones to cross over into the EDM Billboard charts in recent memory, if this ever crossed over into the Billboard charts, I wouldn't complain, because this is great. Number 2. A common thing you may have noticed when it comes to the top 5 is that these songs took me by complete surprise. Whether it's because of the quality or the artists making fantastic songs in a year where they didn't put out good material, or artists that I never expected to make a return. But this is one of the bigger cases because in a year where Britain was dominant and most of the main Monstercat members were absent, I never imagined a song like this getting signed on a label, let alone bringing back memories from songs almost a decade old. And around 3 years ago, I never imagined this artist would ever make a song like this. But time certainly caught up to me, you know, like a ghost in the shadow. I remember the first time I heard Roy Knox with Lost in Sound and Earthquake, and I remember absolutely hating those songs, primarily because of those awkward vocal chops that ruined what could have been decent songs, and Blue Eyed Demon wasn't much better. The only good song of his that I could tolerate back then was About Me with Coven, where it felt more like their song than it did Roy Knox's. But it was after 2021 where Roy Knox started improving by removing those vocal chops and replacing them with leads that matched his production. And while About You was a good single last year, along with You and a collaboration with Have this year, Ghost in the Shadows was a single that clicked with me so much more. Where the biggest comparison people make to this is Snowblind by AU5. For a Monstercat to do that in 2024, especially given the Britain influx, it sounded impossible. But the moment I heard a teaser on Call of the Wild, I knew this was going to be a great track. Those opening pianos sound pretty, along with the muted synth pads. The trance drops sound fantastic, with Roy Knox's leads really cutting through and giving the song some drive, along with an electric guitar solo of all things. And the color bass drop showcases both Roy Knox and Dirtcat's styles effectively, with the bro-step growls having some impact and Roy Knox's powerful leads coming in the best possible time, creating a drop with some muscle and weight behind it. But it's the side trance bro-step fusion of a second drop that makes the song even more awesome. As if that was even possible, with the vocal chops playing off the metallic throbbing of synths where I was kind of a bit off guard, and ends with a really satisfying bro step drop giving you one last rush as the tension rises and then fades out. And what you have is a song that feels like one of a kind these days, and I'm happy that Roy Knox utilized that potential and went all in the best way possible. If you haven't listened to this yet, now is your chance to do so. But before we get to my number 1 pick, let's talk about Silk. It's a sub-label that I haven't given enough attention for my annual videos, and the reasons why have changed over the years. When the sub-label was first acquired by Monstercat, the reason why I didn't cover it was because a lot of the songs sounded samey and weren't really my thing. But ever since 2023, my opinion has changed around Silk. Nowadays, the reason I exclude Silk from the annual videos is because, to be honest, the sub-label has an unfair advantage. The worst the sub-label has to offer are tracks that are just average and forgettable, and Silk songs have topped my list ever since Monstercat bought Silk. In 2021, it was The Light by Vintage and Morelli. In 2022, it was Aurora by Liam Thomas. And in 2023, it was the whole BT album. So in order to compensate that there are no worse Silk contenders, and Silk songs top my list if I were to include them, and that includes this year, I don't really cover Silk songs for my annual videos. That said, I do recognize that Silk has always been the black sheep of the sublabels, and me avoiding it doesn't help matters. So if you want to see what songs the sublabel has this year that are great songs, here's a list of what I consider to be my favorites. Check these out, let me know what you think. I'm not sure if I'll use this format once I cover 2021 and 2022, but for now, this is what I could come up with. But with that said, now on to number 1. But at the end of the day, it had to go to this. If you've been paying attention to what I've been saying, you're expecting a certain artist. But what song it is, that's the big question. And while there are many contenders for this list on the album, this is the single that hit the most. And I thought it wouldn't happen. I thought the best was already clear cut. I didn't think before this album released that this would be my favorite. But this is where the biggest surprise came for me, because I didn't expect him to release this song so soon, let alone change it as much as he did. But at the end of the day, those changes grew on me, and as a result, we have one of his best songs to date. So with that said, I'm out of rain. It's from the meadow that's rubbing me. Sounds like incremental. You draw me to. You don't need me to tell you that I Contain Flashing Images is a great album, but it's always interesting how so many people have different takes on which single is their favorite. And while people have pointed out to Solar Punk, Digital Friends, Hopeless, and Lost Call as their favorites, Ecstatic and Irresponsible is my favorite from the album. For those of you who haven't listened to his Gravity set in 2021, it's been modified so much that it feels like a completely different song, except for those glistening chiptune leads which has been left unmodified and sound really nice, as well as the vocal chop playing nicely with percussion clap. That's one of my favorite bits about the ID, and it's one of my favorites on the track itself. But even with that, the new elements added are just as good, including a vocal performance from Dualistic of all people, with his breathy delivery harkening back to the early 2000s era of synthpop. Reminds me a bit of Empire of the Sun. But really, the whole song is just gorgeous to listen to, with so many leads and melodies constantly evolving and changing, and all of it sounds coherent, like it belongs here. I can't tell you how many times I've played through the verse production, sometimes even more than the drops themselves. And that's before we get into those drops with those bright saw pads and analog synths cutting through to create depth, along with those chiptune leads from before. And a final drop that combines everything together to create a blissful experience, with Dualistic's vocal whoops providing one of the better flows I've heard in a while. This is one of the biggest surprises knowing the context of the Gravity set, and it's still delivered a great experience. It's up there with Yesterday and Strangers as one of Nomada's best songs, and it's the #1 best Monstercat song of 2024. I have no clue if Nomada will release next year, but if he does, I really hope he brings more of this to the table, because this certainly made me ecstatic. Thanks for watching. If you like what we saw here, please be sure to like and subscribe. If you want it as well, please subscribe to my main channel. I'm planning on covering broader topics related to films and animation, so be on the lookout for those. I'm hoping to start my Throwback Monstercat series where I cover past years of Monstercat, including my updated 2022 lists. But until then, I will see you all soon.